Hi, everybody. Today what you're going to be doing is working with reflecting a point in the coordinate plane. It sounds really tricky, but it actually is, once you practice a little bit, you'll really understand it and you'll say, oh, okay, this is easy. I'm hoping. All right, so I am going to, let's use blue. All right, we're going to read this. This is right from your big ideas. And this is from example 3. Examples 1 and 2 we already did. So we're going to go right to example 3 for us. So for the key idea, it says reflecting a point in the coordinate plane is to reflect a point in the x-axis, use the same x-coordinate, and take the opposite of the y-coordinate. So we're just going to do an example of the first bullet to make sure you really understand. So what you're going to do is I'm going to do an example of 3, 4. All right, so it says reflect a point in the x-axis. So here's the x-axis right here. And use the same x-coordinate. So that means we're going to keep that. But take the opposite of the y-coordinate. And we learned about the opposite. So the opposite of the y-coordinate, the opposite of 4, is going to be -4. And you just reflected a point in the x-axis. Okay, so now if we do the second bullet, so we're going to do the same example, 3, 4, starting over. And it says to reflect a point in the y-axis, use the same y-coordinate. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this, but I'm going to keep my y-coordinate and take the opposite of the x-coordinate. So the opposite of my 3 is -3. So my little trick in my head is, for the first one, it says reflect across the x-axis. So when we reflect, let's see if I can write this. When we reflect across x-axis, you're really just changing the y to the opposite. Changing, or let's change that word changing. We're gonna find the opposite of the y. Okay, so I can change that. And if we're going to reflect across the y-axis, you're going to find the opposite of the x. And that's what we really did. So if you want to pause your video and write those two things, you may. But hopefully that can help you when we're doing this. Okay, so we're going to go into example 3. All right, here we are at example 3, and I'm hoping the sound works. I've been playing around, and I think I got the sound to work while I'm talking as well. So we're going to try it out. If it doesn't work, you can just watch it, or you can just fast forward, and you can go on Big Ideas and watch the example through your computer. Okay?
Part A. Reflect -2, 4 in the x-axis. Plot -2, 4. To reflect -2, 4 in the x-axis, use the same x-coordinate, -2, and take the opposite of the y-coordinate. The opposite of 4 is -4. So the reflection of -2, 4 in the x-axis is -2, -4. Part B. Reflect -3, -1 in the y-axis. Plot -3,
Okay, so I want to stop there for a second because I want to show you, if you notice, when they say reflect in the x-axis, we said we're going to change and we're going to find the opposite of the y. All right, so it looks like they did. So here's the y, it was 4, and now it's -4. Now I want you to look at something because it says you're reflecting across the x-axis. If you're going from this coordinate to this coordinate, look what we're reflecting. We're going through the x-axis. That's where the x-axis is coming through. So when you're reflecting across or in the x-axis is staying the same. You're -2, you're -2. Your y is what is going to be changing because you're going from quadrant 2 to quadrant 3. And that means your y is now positive, which is now going to be negative. Okay?
-1. To reflect -3, -1 in the y-axis, use the same y-coordinate, -1, and take the opposite of the x-coordinate. The opposite of -3.
So to stop this for a second, I want you to think before it shows you, where do you think your coordinate is going to end up being? Is it going to be in quadrant 1? Is it going to be in quadrant 2? Is it going to be in quadrant 3? Now remember, it's already in quadrant 3. Or is it going to be in quadrant, if it lets me do it? I don't think it's letting me do it. Quadrant 4. There we go. It's not letting me write quadrant 4. I'm sorry. All right. So just look and see. You're right here at -3, -1. We need to go and reflect in the y-axis, which think about where you need to go and what quadrant, and then see what you're going to be changing. So let's see if you were right.
Is 3. So the reflection of -3, -1 in the y-axis is 3, -1.
So I hope you said quadrant 4 because you were correct. All right, so we are now going to do some try-its together. If you need to, go to and get a loose leaf and pencil, please. And we are going to do these together. Okay. So we're going to work with try-it number 9 first. And it starts with 3, -2. So you actually don't need to graph these. If you do need to graph them and you would like to, just to show yourself and to see exactly where you're going, and if you're going across the x-axis or the y-axis, you can. But we can do this just by looking at the ordered pair. So we are at 3, -2, and it's asking us to reflect 3, -2 in the x-axis. So that's telling me that if it's going in the x-axis, we need to change the y. So we're going to keep our 3, and then we're going to do the opposite of -2, which is 2. Okay, I'm going to change my color, and we're going to do it again. So this time go back to the original, so 3, -2. And now this time it's saying in the y-axis. So that means that your y is going to stay the same. So that means your x is going to be changing and find the opposite. So we're going to have this -2 stay the same, but we're going to have +3 now become -3. Okay, so we are on number 10, and they give us 4, 0. Don't let that 0 trick you. So we are going to reflect in the x-axis first. So that means we need to keep our x, but we're going to change and find the opposite of our 0. Well, the opposite of 0 is 0. So nothing really changes, okay? But let's see if I do some orange here, okay? If we go back to the original, 4, 0, this time for B, it says you're going to reflect in the y-axis. So that means y is staying the same, but your x is changing. You're going to find the opposite of your x. The opposite of 4 is -4. So your new answer is -4, 0. So this is your answer, and this is your answer. So this is for A, and this is for B. Okay, so for number 11, we're going to have -5, 1.5. So it says for A, we're going to reflect in the x-axis. So that means your x is staying the same, but your y is going to find the opposite. So it's no longer going to be +1.5. It's going to be -1.5. Okay, so this is your answer for A. And then for B, For B, you're going to go back to the original, so -5 comma 1.5. And then you're going to, for B, it says reflect in the y-axis. So that means your y stays the same, but your x is going to be the opposite. So it's no longer -5, it's going to be +5. And then this would be your answer for B. Okay, so we're going to watch example 4 now.
Reflect 2, 1 in the x-axis followed by the y-axis. Step 1. Plot 2, 1. Step 2. Reflect 2, 1 in the x-axis. To reflect in the x-axis, use the same x-coordinate, 2, and take the opposite of the y-coordinate. The opposite of 1 is -1. The reflection of 2, 1 in the x-axis is 2, -1. The direction tells you to reflect 2, 1 in the x-axis followed by the y-axis. When reflecting a second time, be sure to use the reflected point and not the original point. So step 3, reflect 2, -1 in the y-axis. To reflect in the y-axis, use the same y-coordinate, -1, and take the opposite of the x-coordinate. The opposite of 2 is -2. The reflection of 2, -1 in the y-axis is -2, -1. So the reflection of 2, 1 in the x-axis followed by the y-axis is -2, -1.
Okay, so I'm going to show you real quick. I want to make sure you understand this. So they are now asking you to reflect across both axes. So in the previous ones, it was only asking you to reflect either the x-axis or the y-axis. This time it's asking for both. So if you're starting at 2, -1, 2, 1, you are going to first go across the x-axis. So here we are going across the x-axis. Then you're going across the y-axis. So technically you can skip going through one and then the other. You can actually, if you want to, if you're really understanding this, you can go straight to this. So if you're at 2, 1, and you're going to reflect across both axes, you're doing the opposite of both of them. So it'll be -2, -1, and that's what you came to. All right, so that's a little trick for you. All right, so we are going to do numbers 12, 13, 14, and 15 together. So for number 12, we have 3, 2. Now, the way the program wants you to do it, they want you to actually do each step. So we'll do each step for the first one, but then you don't have to for the rest. So for 3, 2, that says in the x-axis, then followed by the y-axis. So if you're doing the x-axis, that means your y is going to find the opposite. And then when you're finding the y-axis, that means your x, you're looking for the opposite. Okay, so that means let's start with the x. So that means it's going to be changing the opposite of y. So it'll be 3, your 2 is going to become -2. And then usually we go back to the original, but not here. You're now going to look at what you just did. So it's now going to be reflecting the y-axis. So you're finding the opposite of x. So that means your +3 is now going to be -3. And that's your final answer. Okay, so now we're on number 13. So for number 13, we have -1, 2. And this time, let's not do each one separately. Let's just find the reflection across both axes at the same time. So when you're finding both of them, all you're doing is finding the opposite of each one. So what's the opposite of -1? 1. What's the opposite of 2? -2. So that's your answer. Okay, we are on number 14. So we're at -4, -3. And they're saying to reflect in the x-axis followed by the y-axis. So basically they're asking for both axes. So our -4 and a -3, we need to find the opposite of both. So the opposite of -4 is 4, and the opposite of -3 is 3, and that's your final answer. Okay, and the last one is 5, comma, -2.5. That's a negative. Okay, so we're going to reflect in both axes, the x-axis and the y-axis. So that means we need to change the opposite, find the opposite of both. So our opposite of our 5 is -5, and opposite of -2.5 is 2.5. And that's your final answer. All right, so you're going to have some big idea assignment, a couple of questions on just like how you have for homework. Make sure you ask for help if you need help. Have a great day, everyone.